Welcome, everyone. My name is Gayathri Ramprasad. I'm the founder and president of ASHA International, a Portland-based nonprofit organization dedicated to normalizing conversations about mental health and inspiring hope and healing, one story at a time. At ASHA International, we believe our stories are our superpowers. Every time we share our mental health story, we end stigma, we give hope to those who are struggling, and help build communities of empathy, support, and inclusion where all of us can thrive. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Yamini Rajan. Yamini is one of ASHA's youth storytellers, and she's also the winner of the 2019 Hope Bringer Award. Yamini is currently a student at George Washington University. Please feel free to post your questions and comments for Yamini during that conversation, and she'll be happy to answer them. Hey, Yamini.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome. How are you?
I'm good.
So good to see you. Good to see you. Yamini, would you like to take a few minutes and share your story and how art has had an incredible healing force in your life?
Yeah, so my story, I guess, kind of started when I moved to the US when I was 11, so that December 2012. And moving here was very hard for me. It was like a rough transition in general, just as like a teenager moving like across the world. And then 3 months after we moved here, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was very chaotic time. I was like struggling to fit in at school and make friends there. And I had like a very hectic home life with my mom, like going through treatment. And I just remember feeling like very angry all the time, very upset. And I like isolated myself from my family. I didn't really want to talk to anyone, like didn't really want to talk to anyone at school. And I just was very, very lonely. And that like feeling kind of stuck with me all throughout 6th grade, all throughout 7th grade. And then towards like the middle of 7th grade, I started falling in, like becoming friends with more people in class. And I became best friends with one girl in particular who was also dealing with her own mental health struggles. And being from like India, and my parents had never had that conversation with me about like what mental health is. Like I had no idea. And I had never seen anything other than what I'd seen in movies and media of like people in straitjackets and like psych wards. And I didn't identify with that. So once I met her and saw what she was going through, I could relate to some of those feelings. And so I started copying like a lot of the stuff that she was doing. And so I fell into bulimia, I fell into self-harm, cutting class, like stuff like that, like just using all of her coping mechanisms. And it wasn't really working for me. I just ended up feeling worse and worse. And then in the beginning of 8th grade, when I was 13, I tried to commit suicide. And after that, I think was when I realized I really needed to like get a handle on this. Like this isn't really a sustainable way to like keep on going. And to be honest, I was quite exhausted. Like it's really tiring trying to like put on a happy face and act like everything's okay all the time. And this had been going on for like 2.5 years now.
Right.
And so I finally like went to my school counselor, Mr. Everson at Stoller, and I told him everything that had happened. And I was like, this is how I've been feeling for like a really long time now. And I tried to commit suicide and I don't know what to do. And from there, my parents were called. They talked to the school. And it took a little bit of convincing on mine and Mr. Everson's part to let my parents let me go to therapy. So I started going to therapy, but to be honest, I didn't really know what to do at therapy. I didn't really understand how to talk to someone, how to let someone in, because I'd built these walls to like keep all my feelings inside for so long that it wasn't an easy process. And so I did end up having a huge breakdown a couple months after I started therapy and was admitted into a psych ward for about 2 weeks. And I think once I was there, I started to take my mental health way more seriously. And I was like, okay, you really need to try to like get better. No one can really like pull you out of this except for you. And meeting other kids there and like hearing their stories, like it really did help me feel less alone, because I, you know, being like going through like depressive periods and having anxiety, like it can feel really isolating. You can kind of just feel like it's just you that's going through this. So for me, like meeting other kids my own age that were going through similar struggles, it was like really eye-opening. And after getting out, I made like a commitment to myself to really try. So I went back to therapy. I did group therapy. I did art therapy. I was like, so doing art therapy, like that was something that I had done while in the hospital. And I'd never like felt that way before, like felt so relieved, like after every session. Art's something that I've been doing my whole life. Like ever since I was like 2 years old, if you ask my mom, like I was walking around with a pencil and like some crayons. So it had always been there for me. I just don't think I realized how much until I'd stopped doing it. Because at like the height of my depression, like I didn't want to do anything. Like I just sat in my room all day. Like I didn't want to draw. I had nothing to draw about. But doing art therapy and like realizing that like this is an outlet, that it's mine, it's my coping mechanism, it's healthy, it's something I love to do, kind of like set the path forward for me to like use art as like a way to manage my feelings. So
would you like to share some of the art that you've been working on?
Yeah. So
right now through quarantine?
Yeah. So during this quarantine, in the beginning, coming home from college, like it was kind of chaotic, and like I did see my anxiety and stress levels kind of go up, especially like transitioning from like in-person class to like online school. So I bought myself a sketchbook at the beginning of quarantine, and I've been trying to like fill it up. So this is like the first one that I was doing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And kind of just, you know, I'm someone who really likes drawing portraits in like colors. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So like just, you know, some.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I have a lot of questions. First of all, I love you to pieces. It's been such a privilege to know you and to love you and to watch you grow and become this amazing mental health advocate and just a good human being. You know, at a time when our world, our country is going through such a difficult time, you give me hope.
Thank you.
Yeah. So first off, being a brown girl in a white world can be difficult.
Yeah.
And I know you had a hard time, and hey, I still, find it challenging some days. So tell me about some of your challenges and what helped you overcome them.
So I think right now we're seeing a lot of ignorance in the world. And that's something that, I have like not to the extent, but when I first moved here, it was extremely difficult for me to relate to other kids here. Growing up in India, like I'd seen like movies and TV shows, and like I watched all the same like programs that kids here did growing up. So like I guess me and my sister kind of had an idea of what the US was like. We visited here before, like we have cousins who've lived here. So for us, like we had a picture in our head of what like the US was going to be like. But I think coming here, especially with Portland and going to Stoller, a lot of the kids in my 6th grade class were white. And, I really didn't have anything in common with them, purely because I don't think they understood where I was from. So for them, it was like, oh, like, do you ride elephants in India? Did you live in a mud hut? Like made fun of my accent, like made fun of like the way I dressed, the like food that my mom would cook me for lunch, like stuff like that. Yeah. And like looking back, it seemed like little things, but as a 12-year-old who had just moved like halfway across the world, like it was devastating. Like it was really hard. It was really, really hard because it felt like no matter what I did, I was too brown. I was too brown to fit in with the white people. And my interests had always been different from what I realized was like the Desi American culture here. which was something that I had no idea about.
So you didn't fit into the Indian community here in
It really felt like I didn't feel like I fit into the Indian community. I wasn't doing the same activities as them. The way Stoller was set up, like a lot of the Indian kids were in a different class than I was. So I didn't relate to them in terms of academics. I didn't relate to them in terms of extracurricular activities. Just my general interest, I was always more into like arts and English and history, and I liked doing theater, and I liked listening like rock music, like stuff like that. And
you were not doing Kumon and
like I wasn't doing Kumon after school. Like I wasn't in like pre-calculus as a seventh grader, like stuff like that. Like, and you know, not all kids were like that, but you know, it was made kind of apparent to me by some individuals in middle school that, you know, I was considered dumb for a brown kid. And it just, it took me a long time, I think.
I wonder what you'd want to say to them. You got into pretty much every school that you apply to, and you're a brilliant student and a beautiful artist and a human being and a mental health champion to boot. So come on. Yeah. But
it did take me a long time to like realize that, you know, just because they say I'm dumb doesn't mean I'm dumb. Right. But I think that a part of them saying that did make me work harder, especially in high school. Like for me, like it was like a challenge. I was like, I'm going to do IB diploma and I'm going to graduate with IB diploma just to make sure like everyone knows that I'm not stupid. And it might've been like a stupid reason to like commit to it, you know, just to prove other people wrong. But at the end of the day, like at graduation, like I sat there and I was like, I did it. Like 2 years of like no sleep, like, and like working like my butt off for these academic classes, like I did it. And I think it was like a big like win for me, like a personal win for me. So
Absolutely. So to any young person out there who doesn't feel like they fit in, what would you tell them, Yamini? What would your message to them be?
No one can make you feel like, no one can project their opinion on you unless you let them. That's like a big thing that like, that's something my dad actually told me like in middle school and like throughout high school. Like no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Like as long as you know what you want and you know what your interests are and you know like how to get there, like no one can tell you differently. And I think it took me a very long time to learn that and accept it and like apply it to my life. And it is something that I still struggle with, but you know, I know what I want and I know who I am, and the people that care about me and love me and the people I love and care about know who I am, and that's all that matters. Absolutely. And you don't need to listen to anyone else.
Absolutely. You know, talking to your parents about your mental health specifically can be very, very difficult. And I know you have received this question many times where you're presented in schools, you know. Lots of times our parents just think we're, you know, being typical teenagers or just going through a phase or, you know, whatever it is, they don't take us seriously. And I know it was a struggle for you to open up to your parents as well. So what would, you know, what helped you, first of all, break through and share with your own parents what you were struggling with, and what would your advice be for other young people who are struggling right now today, but don't know how to talk to their parents about their struggles?
So for me, one, like being a person of color, being an immigrant, like just having conversations about mental health, like it's not a thing in India. Like my parents like didn't talk to, like my parents, it didn't occur to, it's like not their fault. I truly like have never blamed my parents for this, but they just never thought they needed to, you know, it wasn't something that ever crossed their mind. And as a result, like I was ignorant as to what is mental health, what is depression, what is anxiety, what does it feel like? How do you like work with it? How do you cope? And for a long time, like I kept those feelings inside, and like through therapy, like I realized like I've been depressed and anxious for a lot longer than I thought I was. You know, those feelings did start in like elementary school. Like I was like a 8-year-old, and it's something that like it made me feel like a freak, to be completely honest. Like I didn't know anyone else who felt like this. No one else had said anything if they did. So I really just did think it was me. And for a long time, like I was afraid. It wasn't that I was like, I didn't think my parents wouldn't understand. Like maybe they wouldn't, but I just didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
Like it was like a fear of like I failed them, you know, that like they would be disappointed in me for feeling this way. And it like I carried that like guilt and shame around for like a really long time. And I think what really brought me to like telling them about it was after my suicide attempt.
Yeah.
Where I was like, it's gonna sound corny, but it was my little sister, you know, like my mom had cancer. My sister was 10 when we moved here. So she'd already been going through a lot. Like having a mom with cancer and moving across the country is a lot for any 10-year-old. So like for me, it was like, I can't be another burden. I can't be another like problem in Antra's life. So I really need to like say something, but I still wasn't ready to talk to my parents about it yet. And that's why I went to my school counselor. So I don't know, I guess to anyone who is like thinking about telling their parents and is unsure how to, I would say talk to it. Sometimes it is easier to talk to someone else.
True.
And in some way, like in my head, it was like, it's easier to disappoint Mr. Everson than just disappoint my parents, you know?
Yeah.
And I had him tell them, and that was easier for me. And like, that's an option. Like you can always go talk to someone else and have them convey your message if you aren't like ready to tell your parents up front by yourself. As long as you are on the path to getting help, I don't think it matters how you get there.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So parents, on the other hand, right? I know you're not a parent, but you have parents. And through your own journey, I'm sure you have some empathy and some understanding for the struggles that parents have in reaching their children and having this conversation about mental health. So what advice would you have for parents in creating an environment within their own home where a child does not feel judged or does not feel like she's going to let her parents down, or, you know, in any way feel like she's a failure and a burden to them? You know, how do parents, from your perspective as a child, how can parents create that safe and loving and accepting, empathetic environment in our homes?
I think a part of it is to like show your kids that like you have struggles too, that you also deal with problems. And I like, as I'm growing older, like I've realized like life only gets more stressful. Like being an adult is not easy. And I think anyone who's a parent will like agree with that because it's so hard. So showing your kids that you also like have failures and you also have worries and you also have problems, because before that, before I parents always like untouchable to me in a way of like, my mom was going through cancer and she never let it get her down. Or maybe she did, but she never broke down in front of me and my sister. You know, like she always tried to make things as like happy and normal as possible. And like my dad did the same. Like me and my sister would go to Seattle to stay with my aunt so we wouldn't have to go see my mom go through chemo, like stuff like that. Just like, so I don't know, to parents, I would say show your kids that like you also have problems. And I think that makes you more relatable to your kids. I think that after like I came out and like told my parents everything, like now like my parents are way more open with me with like what they're going through, like their stresses in life, like and like, you know, your kids are smart. Like your kids always like, I don't know, sometimes like talking to your kids about problems, like they can give you a perspective that like you would have never thought of on your own. And I think that like trying to be more relatable to your kids will make them want to open up to you. And also like, I think some parents' first reaction to, well, my parents actually had, like, there's two reactions that I've kind of noticed through talking to people. My parents had both of them. Like my mom took it as like a failure on her own parenting, which it absolutely was not. It was like something that I was going through on my own. So it really didn't have anything to do with her and like anything she had done to me. And like for my dad, like he immediately sprung into action. He's like, okay, go to therapy twice and you'll be okay. You know, like, so trying to understanding that it's like not your fault. It's like maybe there are things that you did unaware, like let your kid talk to you. Like it's not your fault. Don't make it about yourself. And two, like just let your kid take it at their own pace. Like everyone will work through the problems at their own time. So trying to rush the process like isn't really going to benefit them in any way.
Absolutely. I just want to take a moment and again invite our viewers, if they had any questions or comments for you, would love to answer them. So absolutely, Yamini, you know, I'm even as a mother myself, you know, you're right. You know, when you can share your truth, your troubles, your humanity with your children, not only do they embrace you for it, they feel heard and seen and know that they're not alone, that they're not freaks for feeling a certain way or experiencing pain or anguish in certain ways. So no, absolutely. Thank you for that. You know, about schools and about teachers, the whole educational system, right? I mean, so, you know, as kids, you spend so much of your waking hours in schools or colleges. And so, you know, what's your advice? How can we make our schools and our colleges an inclusive place where all kids can learn and thrive?
Well, one thing for sure is we need more mental health workers in schools. I know that I got lucky in both middle school and high school because I developed very close relationships with both my counselors. And so I was then able to use that closeness to my advantage to go see them whenever I wanted, or like try and see them whenever they were at like as frequently as I could. But there's so many kids, especially in high school, I had so many of my friends who only talked to their counselor when they needed a college rec letter at the end of junior year.
Yeah.
You know, and like, one, how is this person supposed to write about you when they've never met you before? And two, I know that they had struggles. Like my friends were struggling with stuff too. They just never felt like they could A, get an appointment to meet their counselor, or B, like ever like feel like they could talk to this person because they never met them because our counselors were so overwhelmed. Like I went to Sunset and we had like 2,000 kids and we had maybe like 5 or 6 mental health counselors for 2,000 people. There's like absolutely no way every single child can like make their voice heard. So there's that one. We just need more people dedicated to helping students because high school is rough, especially like when you start, like it's rough from like freshman year all the way to senior year. Like it's hard and like people change so much in those 4 years that you really do need someone to support you through it. And also having counselors trained for like multicultural in like a multicultural sense. One type of problem or person does not fit every kid. And I have seen that, like, you know, there's sometimes like I would be told things by teachers at school that simply wouldn't work at my house, you know, because my parents are Indian and I come from that background. I can't talk to them in that way, or I can't say certain things, or I can't do certain things like that. And so having like training teachers and training counselors to understand different cultures, different backgrounds is super important because like therapy is not one size fits all. And I think that it's really important to understand that and like apply that in especially school settings when we're meeting so many different people from so many different backgrounds.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have been a storyteller for several years, but you weren't always comfortable sharing your mental health story. So do you want to just take a moment to tell us what inspired you to share your story? And how have you realized that it is your superpower? It not only has empowered you as a person, but it has empowered so many people that have heard your story, you know, here in the US, but also in India.
Yeah, so my mom actually went to ASHA Celebration of Hope, I want to say in October of 2016.
Yep.
And she heard Hannah, who's another youth storyteller, she's wonderful. She heard Hannah tell her story. And this was around the time that I had just recently started like, you know, getting more serious with therapy and was like doing theater, like stuff like that, just to like trying to get myself back on track. And my mom was like super moved by what Hannah had said, because I don't think my parents or my mom in particular had heard another kid like around Hannah's a year younger than me. So she'd never heard like someone my age talk about stuff like this. And so she sat through that entire gala just crying. And then she came home and told me all about Hannah and was like, this is something you should do. And while I was like super like taken back and like kind of inspired by the fact that like this girl my age, around like 14, was standing in front on the stage telling everyone like I didn't want to be that person. And my hesitation was like, I don't want like my mental illness to like define me, you know? I don't want to be known as like depression girl. Like that's, and I didn't want people to know me just for that. And for me, it was like, it was personal. Like I was like, this is like one of my biggest secrets. And it's something that I've kept on the inside for so long. And I've only recently started telling people about it. So like, I'm not going to, in my own personal life, so I'm not going to go and stand on a stage and like go tell everyone. And it did take like a lot of convincing on my mom's part and your part to get me to even meet with you. And I think my mom had given me your book prior to our meeting, and I like finished it in like a day. Like I couldn't put it down. And I think that's when I kind of realized, I was like, you know what, like, let me just try it. I was in like this point in time, like I was like, hey, I'm going to therapy, I'm doing theater, like let me just try new things just to see what I want to do. And so I was like, I'm gonna try it. I'll do, and I think we'd agreed that I do one storytelling session. And I was like, you know what, this is like not a big deal. Like I'm not gonna see any of these people again. So it's fine. Let's just do it. And I think like that was my mindset going into it. And once I did that, I was super nervous. I'm pretty sure the first time I told my story, I spent the entire time just staring down because I didn't want to make eye contact with anyone. But it was like what happened after that entire event, like the number of people who came up to me, like not even just kids, like there were like people in their 60s and like adult, like people my parents' age, like all coming up to me and saying like, oh, like we were so inspired to hear your story. Like, this is how I feel, or this is how my daughter felt, like, and stuff like that, telling me about their kids, telling me about them. And like made me realize like, you really aren't the only person who feels this way, Yamini. Like there's so many other people who are taking something away from this. And like, I guess I've just been like chasing that feeling ever since. And like, it's been like 3 years now and I still love doing this. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, as somebody that has watched you grow as a person, but also as a storyteller, you know, I am just so grateful for the courage and the compassion and the commitment you have had. Because there's, you know, first of all, nobody wants to talk about their mental health. And yet it is now more than ever, it is important that we share our struggles because, again, like you said, so people know that they're not alone, no matter how they're feeling. They're not crazy. They're not freaks. They're just being human, responding to the world that they live in. And so it's important for people like you and me to step up and share our story. Number two, it's about representation. Mm-hmm. You know, until a stranger took a chance on me to come meet me in the hospital at the psych ward, she gave me I had no clue that I had a life ahead of me. At that point, I was in my late 20s and I'd given up any hope for a life, right? And yet the stranger comes and shares her story and gives me the gift and completely changes my life. So yeah, your story is very, very, very important. I believe Ashley had a question for you, and there you go. Can you see it, Yamini?
Yes. Was the one most happy and the most challenging thing I faced in Okay, so I guess one of the most happy things that I faced during recovery was, I definitely do think like this whole experience has brought in like my entire family closer. Me and my sister would joke around my parents, like when we lived in India, we remember like, having parents because we would always just be around and like our parents would be doing their own thing. And I definitely do think like this is like made me so close to my family. So that's like one of the happiest things, because at the end of the day, like my parents supported me through this. So I know like they'll support me through anything. And like, I know that like they'll always have my back. Like I'll always have my sister. So even through like really difficult times in high school, like with like social stuff or like school stuff, like I've always had, like, that's one thing that like I've gotten out of this is like just the support of my family. And one of the most challenging things is not beating myself up if I like do end up like taking 2 steps back. Like it took me a long time to like realize that like depression is not going to go away. Like anxiety is not going to go away. I'm never going to stop having like the thoughts that I used to have. And like, just because I still can go the depression, just still go through periods of anxiety, doesn't mean that I like relapsed. It's just I'm still a person. Like, my life still has stresses. My life still has like challenges, but I had to keep reminding myself, like, okay, yes, you're feeling the same feelings, you're having the same thoughts, but you know how to cope with them in a different way now. You know, like, you don't need to go cut. You can like go do like these like 30 other things you learn in therapy. Like, I think that's like something that's challenging, is like not like getting down on yourself if you feel like you've taken like multiple steps back. Okay, like, let's reevaluate. Like, what have I learned, like, from the beginning to now? And like, how can I apply those to like going forward? How can I make myself feel better in a healthy way?
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Yami. Great response. I think we're over time just a little bit. So I'm going to respond to any other questions and comments on our Facebook page. But I do want first of all, I want to thank you, Yami. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thank you for being so brave and so amazing. Love you to pieces. And, you know, I just, yeah, thank you for all that you are and all that you do. I welcome you to join us in our future conversations on hope and healing that are coming up. Please, you know, like our Facebook page, stay in touch with us, and you'll learn more about our upcoming events as well. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, a day and a wonderful weekend ahead. Thanks, sweetheart. Love you.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.